Hello again. What we're about to read is William Blake's Book of Urizen, otherwise known as the first Book of Urizen. This is an especially interesting manuscript for a number of reasons. Firstly, when it comes to the sequence of Blake's mythology, it is, as the title says, the first. It is the creation story of creation stories. And I say that because Blake's oeuvre is so filled with them. And yet it came out in 1794, and it never had a sequel. Unless, of course, some of the later illuminated manuscripts were meant as tacit continuations. Now, the part that I'm now going to quote is from the William Blake Complete Illuminated Books. It's an introduction. Although probably not the earliest written chapter of Blake's Bible of Hell, the first Book of Urizen describes the initial division of man, with consequences that are explored in Blake's other prophetic books of the 1790s. Reason, in the form of Urizen, separates from the other elements of the human mind, and Los, the eternal artist, takes on the task of giving him form, so that his nature may be recognized by humanity. Los's struggle to give form to Urizen is the central action of the book. In feeling pity for his creation, Los himself divides, becoming enslaved to his own creation. In this book, revolutionary energy in the form of Orc is born and chained to the rock. Meanwhile, Urizen, now fully formed, imprisons the spirit of man in a net of religion. Blake's preoccupation with his creation myth is inseparably entwined with his radical response to the political and social turmoil of the time. The first Book of Urizen is among his most politically committed works. Of the 7 presently known copies, all but 1 are richly colour-printed, and no 2 are the same. That says rather a lot, but I think it's important to clarify what this reveals about Urizen. He isn't simply a dangerous Zoa, and probably the most dangerous out of all 4, nor is he just a fake Gnostic god. He is an invention of man's own mind, of man's own poetic wisdom in the form of Los, a dream turned to nightmare with realization. In this sense, you can read even the start of Blake's mythology as something that is inherently apocalyptic. So, if the computer is working and the images are flashing, let's begin. Preludium to the first Book of Urizen. Of the primeval priest's assumed power, when Eternals spurned back his religion, and gave him place in the north, obscure, shadowy, void, solitary. Eternals, I hear your call gladly. Dictate swift winged words, and fear not to unfold your dark visions of torment. Lo, a shadow of horror is risen, in eternity, unknown, unprolific, self-closed, all-repelling. What demon hath formed this abominable void, this soul-shuddering vacuum? Some said, it is Urizen, but unknown, abstracted, brooding, secret, the dark power hid. Times on times he divided, and measured space by space in his ninefold darkness. Unseen, unknown, changes appeared in his desolate mountains, rifted furious by the black winds of perturbation. For he strove in battles dire, in unseen conflicts with shapes bred from his forsaken wilderness, of beast, bird, fish, serpent, and element, combustion, blast, vapor, and cloud, dark revolving in silent activity, unseen in tormenting passions, an activity unknown and horrible, a self-contemplating shadow, in enormous labours occupied. But Eternals beheld his vast forests. Age on ages he lay, closed, unknown, brooding, shut in the deep, all avoid the petrific, abominable chaos. His cold horrors silent, dark Urizen prepared, his 10,000s of thunders, ranged in gloomed array, stretch out across the dread world. And the rolling of wheels as of swelling seas sound in his clouds, in his hills of stored snows, in his mountains of hail and ice. Voices of terror are heard, like thunders of autumn, when the cloud blazes over the harvests. Earth was not, nor globes of attraction. The will of the immortal expanded or contracted his all-flexible senses. Death was not, but eternal life sprung. The sound of a trumpet, the heavens awoke, and vast clouds of blood rolled round the dim rocks of Urizen, so named that solitary one in immensity, shrill the trumpet, and myriads of eternity muster around the bleak deserts, now filled with clouds, darkness, and waters that rolled perplexed, laboring, and uttered words articulate, bursting in thunders that rolled on the tops of his mountains, from the depths of dark solitude, from the eternal abode in my holiness, hidden, set apart in my stern counsels, reserved for the days of futurity. I have sought for a joy without pain, for a solid without fluctuation. Why will you die, O Eternals? Why live in unquenchable burnings? First I fought with the fire, consumed inwards into a deep world within, a void immense, wild, dark, and deep, where nothing was. Nature's wide womb and self-balance stretched o'er the void, I alone, even I, the wind's merciless bound. But condensing, in torrents they fall and fall. Strong I repelled the vast waves, and arose on the waters a wide world of solid obstruction. Here alone I, in books formed of metals, have written the secrets of wisdom, the secrets of dark contemplation, by fightings and conflicts dire, with terrible monsters sin-bred, which the bosoms of all inhabit, 7 deadly sins of the soul. Lo, I unfold my darkness, and on this rock place with strong hand the book of eternal brass, written in my solitude. Laws of peace, of love, of unity, of pity, compassion, forgiveness, let each choose one habitation, his ancient infinite mansion, one command, one joy, one desire, one curse, one weight, one measure, one king, one God, one law. The voice ended. They saw his pale visage emerge from the darkness, his hand on the rock of eternity, unclasping the book of brass. Rage seized the strong. Rage, fury, intense indignation, in cataracts of fire, blood, and gall, in whirlwinds of sulphurous smoke, and enormous forms of energy, all the 7 deadly sins of the soul, in living creations appeared in the flames of eternal fury. Sundering, darkening, thundering, rent away with a terrible crash, eternity rolled wide apart, wide asunder rolling, mountainous all around, departing, 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 leaving ruinous fragments of life, hanging frowning cliffs on all between, an ocean of voidness unfathomable. The roaring fires ran o'er the heavens in whirlwinds and cataracts of blood, and o'er the dark deserts of Urizen fires pour through the void on all sides, on Urizen's self-begotten armies. But no light from the fires. All was darkness in the flames of eternal fury. In fierce anguish and quenchless flames to the deserts and rocks he ran raging to hide, but he could not. Combining, he dug mountains and hills in vast strength. He piled them in incessant labor, in howlings and pangs and fierce madness, long periods in burning fires, laboring till hoary and age broke and aged in despair and the shadows of death. And a roof, vast petrific around, On all sides he framed like a womb, where thousands of rivers in veins of blood pour down the mountains to cool the eternal fires beating without from eternals. And like a black globe viewed by sons of eternity, standing on the shore of the infinite ocean like a human heart struggling and beating, the vast world of Urizen appeared. And Los, round the dark globe of Urizen, kept watch for eternals to confine. The obscure separation alone for eternity stood wide apart, as the stars are apart from the earth. Los wept howling around the dark demon, and cursing his lot, for in anguish Urizen was rent from his side, and a fathomless void for his feet, and intense fires his dwelling. But Urizen laid in a stony sleep unorganized, rent from eternity. The Eternals said, "What is this? Death. Urizen is a clod of clay." Los howled in a dismal stupor, groaning, gnashing, groaning, till the wrenching apart was healed. But the wrenching of Urizen healed not. Cold, featureless flesh or clay, rifted with direful changes, he lay in a dreamless night, till Los roused his fires, affrighted at the formless, unmeasurable death. Los, smitten with astonishment, frightened at the hurtling bones, and at the surging sulphurous, perturbed immortal man raging in whirlwinds and pitch and nitre round the furious limbs of Los, and Los formed nets and gins, and through the nets round about he watched in shuddering fear the dark changes, and bound every change with rivets of iron and brass. And these were the changes of Urizen. Ages on ages rolled over him. In stony sleep ages rolled over him, like a dark waste, stretching, changeable by earthquakes riven, belching sullen fires on ages rolled ages in ghastly sick torment. Around him, in whirlwinds of darkness, the eternal prophet howled, beating still on his rivets of iron, pouring sodor of iron, dividing the horrible night into watches. And Urizen, so his eternal name, his prolific delight obscured more and more, in dark secrecy hiding in surging sulphurous fluid his fantasies. The eternal prophet heaved the dark bellows, and turned restless the tongs, and the hammer incessant beat, forging chains new and new, numbering with links hours, days, and years. The eternal mind bounded, began to roll, eddies of wrath ceaseless round and round, and the sulphurous foam surging thick settled a lake bright and shining clear, white as the snow on the mountains cold. Forgetfulness, dumbness, necessity, in chains of the mind locked up, like fetters of ice shrinking together disorganized, rent from eternity, Los beat on his fetters of iron, and heated his furnace, and poured iron sodor and sodor of brass. Restless turned the immortal, enchained, heaving, dolorous, anguished, unbearable, till a roof, shaggy, wild, enclosed in an orb, his fountain of thought. In a horrible, dreamful slumber, like the linked infernal chain, a vast spine writhed in torment upon the winds, shooting pained ribs like a bending cavern, and bones of solidness froze over all his nerves of joy. And a first age passed over, and a state of dismal woe. From the caverns of his jointed spine, down sunk with fright a red, round globe, hot, burning deep, deep down into the abyss, panting, conglobing, trembling, shooting out 10,000 branches around his solid bones. And a second age passed over, and a state of dismal woe, in harrowing fear rolling round. His nervous brain shot branches round the branches of his heart, on high into two little orbs, and fixed in two little caves, hiding carefully from the wind. His eyes beheld the deep, and a third age passed over, and a state of dismal woe. The pangs of hope began, in heavy pain, striving, struggling, two ears in close volutions. From beneath his orbs of vision, shot spiring out and petrified as they grew, and a fourth age passed, and a state of dismal woe. In ghastly torment sick, hanging upon the wind, two nostrils bent down to the deep, and a fifth age passed over, and a state of dismal woe. In ghastly torment sick, within his ribs bloated round a craving, hungry cavern. Thence arose his channeled throat, and like a red flame a tongue of thirst and of hunger appeared, and a sixth age passed over, and a state of dismal woe. Enraged and stifled with torment, he threw his right arm to the north, his left arm to the south, shooting out in anguish deep, and his feet stamped the nether abyss in trembling and howling and dismay. And a seventh age passed over, and a state of dismal woe. In terrors, Lars shrunk from his task. His great hammer fell from his hand. His fires beheld, and sickening hid their strong limbs in smoke. For with ruinous noises loud, with hurtlings and clashings and groans, the immortal endured his chains, though bound in a deadly sleep. All the myriads of eternity, all the wisdom and joy of life, roll like a sea around him, except what his little orbs of sight by degrees unfold. And now his eternal life, like a dream, was obliterated. Shuddering, the eternal prophet smote with a stroke from his north to south region. The bellows and hammer are silent now. A nerveless silence, his prophetic voice seized, a cold solitude and dark void, the eternal prophet and Urizen closed, ages on ages rolled over them, cut off from life and light, frozen into horrible forms of deformity. Los suffered his fires to decay, then he looked back with anxious desire, but the space undivided by existence struck horror into the soul. Los wept, obscured with mourning. His bosom earthquaked with sighs. He saw Urizen deadly black, in his chains bound, and pity began, in anguish dividing and dividing, for pity divides the soul in pangs, eternity on eternity. Life in cataracts poured down his cliffs, the void shrunk the lymph into nerves, wandering wide on the bosom of night, and left a round globe of blood trembling upon the void. Thus the eternal prophet was divided before the death image of Urizen, for inchangeable clouds and darkness in a winterly night beheld. The abyss of loss stretched immense, and now seen, now obscured to the eyes of eternals, the visions remote of the dark separation appeared, as glasses discover worlds in the endless abyss of space. So the expanding eyes of immortals beheld the dark visions of loss, and the globe of life-blood trembling.